Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Valley of Secrets by Kari Harmon, narrated by Vanessa Johansson. 1. Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. Carl Jung. The sun was shining the day Jordan Mills found out she was broken. Syracuse, New York didn't get much sunshine. When it did, it was considered a gift. But it didn't feel like a gift to Jordan when shiny rays of hope blanketed everything as her whole world fell apart, much like it was doing today. A bright, shiny day, 6 months later in the spring. A shiny day when Jordan's life would change forever. She set down the Sunday newspaper, pushed her untouched wheat toast away, inhaled the warmed lavender essential oil, and strived for calm as she stared out the window of her fully restored landmark historic house, not far from Syracuse University. A lot of the old buildings had been renovated and turned into apartments, but an apartment would never be good enough for her husband. They had the entire building to themselves, which normally she wouldn't mind. But nothing was normal about her life anymore. She felt more alone than ever in a house this big. The snow had melted. When had that happened? It wouldn't be long before tulips poked their silky heads through the soft earth and bloomed with color. She used to love spring, loved the time when everything was fresh and new, when everything started to grow. Life needed sun to grow. Maybe she didn't get enough sun. Maybe that was why she was broken. She blinked and was taken back to the fall when everything began to die. "I'm so sorry," Dr. Hamlin said, a genuine look of regret shadowing his haggard features. He looked thinner than the last time she had seen him, his lab coat now one size too big. He was her husband, Eric's age, 43, but looked much older, with a head full of gray hair and a lot more wrinkles. They'd gone to college together, Matthew graduating with an MD in obstetric gynecology, and Eric with a PhD in literature. They had both chosen to stay in the area and work. They weren't exactly close, but they'd never lost touch completely. Matthew was a top OB/GYN doctor at University Hospital, and Eric was a professor at Syracuse University. Eric trusted Matthew, and Jordan had trusted Eric. Trusted him with her heart, her soul, and her future the day he'd swept her off her feet and asked her to marry him 13 years ago. She'd grown up as Jordana Wilkinson at Wilkinson's winery on Cayuga Lake, the second largest of the central New York glacial Finger Lakes. She was the youngest of 6 girls. She loved having sisters, and her mother was kind, but Jordan had never really been like the rest of them. Her father was about as old-fashioned as they came, believing girls didn't need an education. They were meant to be wives and mothers, pampered and cherished for all of their days. That's all Jordana had ever known. All of her sisters had gone on to happily marry and have children right out of high school. So when 3 years went by, she was terrified the fairy tale would never happen for her. And then what would she do? She could have sworn she heard someone whisper, "Think for yourself. Get a life. Do whatever the hell you want to," back in those days. But she'd always laughed off her crazy thoughts and tried to stay positive, hopeful. That's why when handsome, dashing Eric Mills, 9 years her senior, had shown up, he'd seemed like Prince Charming, with golden blonde hair and sky-blue eyes. Eric came from money. He was the last of the Mills, and desperate to carry on his family's name by having a son. As taken with Jordana as she was with him, he made her Mrs. Jordan Mills, and she couldn't have been happier. They truly had been happy, at first. He introduced her to a whole new life in Syracuse, showering her with gifts, pampering her with spa treatments and luxurious vacations, and proudly displaying her about at department parties. All she had to do in return was adore him, and give him a son. They'd talked excitedly over names, and whether the baby would look like him or have her auburn hair and jade green eyes. They'd even decorated a nursery, presumptuously assuming it would all be that easy. Over the years, their happiness began to fade as they tried and tried without success to conceive. The pressure became unbearable, but nothing compared to the disappointment simmering in Eric's eyes. When he suggested they see his longtime friend, Jordan had agreed immediately, desperate to try anything that might help them have a baby. She just never imagined there would be nothing in the world that could possibly help them now. "Are you sure, Matt?" Eric asked the doctor after clearing his throat. Eric sat ramrod straight, his sweater vest a perfect fit over his casual cotton pants, with matching shirt and tie, not a hair out of place. His usual work attire. Unlike Dr. Hamlin, Eric looked younger than his years, and more handsome than ever. He couldn't look at Jordan. Her stomach turned over. Why wouldn't he look at her? She'd made sure she was impeccably dressed in the latest fashion, with her hair artfully styled, her posture perfect, knowing she was a reflection of him. So why wouldn't he look at her? She started to shake in the cold, impersonal exam room. Dr. Matthew Hamlin might be the best in his field, but he wasn't exactly the warm, fuzzy type. It was no shock that he wasn't married. Dr. Hamlin stared at Eric for a long moment, and then nodded sadly. "I truly am sorry." The doctor wouldn't look at Jordan either. She couldn't seem to inhale enough air, the pungent scent of antiseptic making her queasy. Why wouldn't anyone look at her? Her skin itched on the inside, and she wanted to crawl outside of her own body, a body that wasn't a temple anymore, but an empty, useless cage. Oh my God, she was trapped inside an empty, useless cage. She desperately wanted out, but there was nothing anyone could do about it. No one could help her now. Matt was the best. All hope was lost. "I'm broken," she said on barely more than a whisper, and something inside of her cracked. A sharp pain pierced her heart as the doctor's words sank in. She was infertile. Her dream of becoming a mother would never happen now. Not ever. Because she wasn't whole. They'd tried IVF among other things, but nothing ever worked. And now she knew why. It was all her fault. Something about her irregular ovulation and hormone deficiencies. She would never feel the flutter of new life growing inside of her womb. Never give birth to a precious creation that was a part of her. Never hold her child in her arms and look into eyes and see herself. Wasn't that why God created woman? To give life? That was all she'd ever wanted, wasn't it? Of course it was. After the shock wore off, the blame set in. She knew she was sounding irrational, but there had to be a reason why she was defective. Her skin was so fair. She'd always been lectured to stay out of the sun. Could that be why? Why had she listened? Everyone knew life needed sunlight to grow. She'd been so stupid to stay out of the sun. Suddenly she couldn't blame Dr. Hamlin or Eric for not looking at her. Couldn't blame her husband when she later found out he'd had an affair with a younger student of his, and the woman was pregnant with his child. Couldn't blame him when he filed for divorce and traded her in for something better. Someone whole. A robin chirped outside Jordan's window, bringing her back to the present. Back to the papers on her table that said her divorce was final. Back to the campus email stating Eric was the proud father of a healthy baby boy. Back to the newspaper article announcing his engagement. Jordan was numb. She hadn't cried or yelled or done anything really. For 6 months, she'd sat alone, licking her wounds and slowly dying inside. No longer stylish and fashionable. What was the point? No one wanted a broken woman. Her parents were disappointed with all that had happened, of course, encouraging her to return to the vineyard and try again. She was only 34, after all. There was still hope she could remarry. She wasn't that broken, and she could always adopt. She could start over. Maybe they were right. 6 months was long enough to wallow in self-pity. She really should get on with her life. But how could she do anything when all she felt was empty inside? Jordan couldn't decide what to do because she'd never had to. Everything had always been decided for her, first by her family and then by Eric. Her mother begged her to at least come for lunch. The sun was shining and it was a beautiful day. She and Eric had always gone to Sunday dinners at her parents' with her siblings and their families. But Jordan hadn't been back since Eric had left her, and her parents hadn't pressed until now. Doing what she always did, Jordan listened to them, even though she'd come to hate the sun. A few hours later, Jordan arrived at Wilkinson's winery on the long, narrow, finger-like Cayuga Lake, the place where she'd grown up, her family home. She hadn't appreciated it back then, but she was old enough now to realize how impressive the place really was. She drove her Mercedes down the long driveway past the large barn used to produce wine from several types of grapes. Jordan knew the winemaking process by heart. Fermentation of the fruit, blending and aging the juice, then bottling and sealing the wine. She drove past the sophisticated wine cellar that housed the barrels and the charming tasting room, until she reached the ancient two-story colonial house overlooking the lake that had been in her family for generations. The house might be old, but it was impeccably kept, with class and good taste. Her father used to be the winemaker, having learned the craft from his father, who'd learned from his father before that, and so on. For generations, a Wilkinson had been at the helm, but Henry Wilkinson didn't have any sons. 6 daughters he pampered and adored, but didn't trust to take over. None of them had complained, happy in their roles of wives and mothers. At 34, Jordan had no desire to take over, not that her father would let her. She'd left at 21. Techniques had changed a lot since then, with modern technology improvements she knew nothing about. Come to think of it, she didn't know much about a lot of things, she suddenly realized. Did being pampered and cherished really involve being naive? Ignorant? She sighed as she shut off the engine and stared at the house. How had she let her life come to this? Shallow emptiness with no depth. She knew how. She'd been so focused on adoring her husband and getting pregnant that she'd lost sight of everything else, including herself. She really should go in. They were all there with their husbands and children waiting for her. It was almost too much to bear. Beyond the house stood rows of grapevines that called to her. Nature had always called to her soul, beckoning for her to do. What, she wasn't exactly sure. Today the urge to follow was stronger than ever. Jordan climbed out of her car and bypassed the house, heading for the vineyard. She tightened her thick sweater coat around her, as March in central New York could be quite chilly still. The snow had melted and the lake thawed out, looking pristine and beautiful in the distance, a calming presence that spoke to her. This place had always had that effect on her. The trees and vines were bare, but would soon sprout leaves and buds now that spring was upon them. The whole winery had an air of elegance and refinery. In fact, her entire life had been elegant and refined. Their winery was housed on the southern end of the lake, near Ithaca. The northern end consisted of shallow mudflats and marshes that drew various migratory birds and encompassed a national wildlife refuge, whereas the southern end consisted of boaters and sport fishermen. Jordan and her sisters used to hang out at the marina and the yacht club on the western shore. Their father had a boat, and they'd soon realized the club was an excellent place to meet eligible bachelors who measured up to his standards. Jordan's sisters had a much easier time of finding a husband than she did. They were all beautiful, tall and elegant with various shades of blonde hair and blue eyes like their mother. Jordan was the only one who looked different. Her father had brown hair back in the day. It was stark white now. And jade green eyes. She had her father's eyes, but that's where the resemblance ended. She looked much more like her aunt Annabeth, with her fiery red hair and sparkling emerald green eyes, only Jordan's hair was a darker auburn and eyes a paler green. She smiled fondly as she walked through the rows of vines, running her fingers lightly over the branches, realizing she hadn't thought of her aunt in years, not since she was 10 years old and her aunt passed away. Jordan's smile faded sadly. She missed her aunt, probably because her mother and sisters were elegant angels who enjoyed being pampered and cherished. Jordan remembered feeling a longing for something more, like her aunt. She was the strongest, most independent woman Jordan had ever known. Her father had named her Jordana, the Anna part after her aunt, Annabeth. Henry had adored his sister when Jordan was born. Annabeth was 10 years younger than Henry, who was 35 when Jordan arrived. But as the years went by, Annabeth became fearless. Stubborn and strong-willed, she had no desire to get married, shocking everyone. She defiantly changed her name to Anna Wilks as she grew increasingly bold, going on grand adventures and taking unnecessary risks, happy not to settle down, happy with who she was, happy to do whatever she damn well pleased, Jordan had once heard her say. No matter how much Henry or their father had tried to talk sense into Annabeth, she wouldn't listen. Jordana had wanted to be just like her. When Anna died in a skydiving accident at 35, Jordan was 10. She'd been devastated, but her father cut her grieving short and quickly steered her back on track, where she grew up and forgot what it was like to be adventuresome and fearless. She thought she'd been happy with her role in life, until now. Jordan suddenly realized with the utmost clarity that it was the role of mother that had called to her, not so much the wife part. She'd simply accepted the rest in order to get what she wanted. But now it was all gone, and she was left with no idea who she was or what she wanted out of life. She still hadn't cried. In fact, she didn't remember crying much about anything since she was 10. She couldn't, because she felt hollow and empty, with nothing left inside, not even tears. Jordan looked up and realized she hadn't walked this far through the vineyard since she was a child. She sucked in a breath as she looked at the strand of trees before her. The fort she and her aunt had built so many years ago was still there. For the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of the carefree child, full of excitement and wonder, ignite within her. Biting her bottom lip, she looked around, but no one was nearby. She climbed into the circle of trees under the rotting wooden roof and sat on a large boulder. Once the leaves came in, the whole world would be shut out, just the way she and her aunt had liked it. The hideaway had been their secret haven, their safe space to think and dream and write. Jordan had forgotten about that. She'd forgotten about this place. She'd forgotten about a lot of things. A strong desire to be close to her aunt settled over her, and Jordan wondered if the box was still there. Looking around frantically, she spotted the metal box, barely visible beneath layers of old dried leaves, and tucked under the blackberry bush where they used to hide it. Holding the box tight in both hands, she returned to the rock. Her heart started beating harder as she dropped to her knees to expose the precious contents from her youth. She picked up the box, skimming her fingers along its rusted edges, anxious to rediscover the many hopes and dreams she'd stored inside. Inhaling a deep breath of crisp air that smelled like wet dirt and lake water, she pried the rusted lid open. Her lips parted for a moment. Then she swallowed the lump in her throat and stared at her diary. Carefully picking it up, she flipped through the pages, the childish scribbling of a confused 10-year-old scrawled across the pages. I don't like when Daddy gets strict. Why is Mommy crying? Jill, Jessica, Jasmine, Jennifer, and Jamie are so pretty. Why am I so plain? I shouldn't be a J. I wish Aunt Annabeth was my mommy. Why couldn't I be an A? Why did you have to go away, Aunt Anna? You're the bravest person I know, Aunt Anna. I love you, and I promise I won't let you down, Aunt Anna. I'll never forget you. But she had let her aunt down, Jordan realized. She'd forgotten her, and now her aunt wasn't the only one who was dead. Mrs. Jordan Mills was dead, and Jordana Wilkinson had died a long time ago. She didn't know who she was anymore. The first tear rolled down her cheek, surprising her, and then the floodgates opened. Sobs racked her body for her aunt, for herself, for her unborn child that would never be, for who she wasn't, for all she'd lost. Her life was as dead as the trees surrounding her, never destined to bloom. She couldn't catch her breath. It felt like forever that she sat on the rock and cried. "What am I going to do now?" She finally said out loud, just to hear a voice and not feel so alone. "Whatever you damn well please," came the whisper. Jordan looked around, startled, but no one was there. Her gaze fell down to her lap, and she blinked. Her aunt's diary lay on top of hers now, with a spine flipped open to page 1. How had that happened? Jordan swallowed hard. The only rule they had ever created was that their diaries were sacred and meant for their eyes only. They talked about everything, but they never talked about what they wrote. It was somehow more special that way. But now the book lay open like an invitation to read the passages and draw strength from her namesake when she needed it most. Jordan was about to close the book, knowing it was wrong. But the words on the page grabbed hold of her and refused to let go, as if a force greater than herself was willing her to read on. "When I'm ready, I will die on my own terms, damn it!" The breath whooshed out of Jordan's lungs as she discovered her aunt's secret. She reread the entire passage to be sure her eyes weren't playing a horrible, sick, twisted trick on her. "Life is so unfair. I waited way too long to start living. I let too many people try to tell me what to do and how to live my life, suppressing what I really wanted in hopes of making everyone happy. For what, 1 year? I only have 1 fucking year left to do what I want. A goddamned brain tumor. How's that possible? I don't get sick. I feel fine. Well, that's it then. No one can know. I won't allow it. I hate pity. I know what I'm going to do. I refuse to die. I choose to live. When I'm ready, I will die on my own terms, damn it." Her aunt was her age when she'd found out she had a cancerous brain tumor. That was when they'd built their fort, and she'd started her journal, never letting on to Jordan or anyone else what was really going on. Her father kept saying he thought Anna was losing her mind with how crazy she was acting, and if that she wasn't careful, she was going to die. But Jordan knew the truth now. Her aunt hadn't been trying to die. She'd been trying to live. Jordan had known her aunt was brave. She'd just never realized how brave. They'd said her parachute never opened the day she went skydiving, the day she'd died. At least she didn't suffer. She'd died doing something exciting while she was still full of life. Flipping through the book, Jordan saw a year's worth of entries. Her aunt had chosen to do one adventurous thing every day for the next year, opting to go without chemo or radiation because she'd wanted to live fully and in the moment. She didn't want to be sick. She wanted to be free. Jordan didn't realize she was softly crying again until she turned the last page and read, "To my darling Jordana, you are strong and brave and beautiful. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. You're special, baby. I can only hope you grow a mind of your own someday. You can do anything you set your mind to. Life is too short to live for others. So, honey, here's my last piece of advice for you. When you are down on your luck and don't know what to do, remember this. Do whatever you damn well please." 2. "You're what?" Henry Wilkinson stared at his youngest daughter in shock 1 week later. They'd had a delicious pot roast dinner prepared by his lovely wife Mary, with his whole family there. The mouth-watering aromas still lingered, but the feeling of contentment and satisfaction had turned to one of indigestion as he tried to process what his daughter had just said. Everyone had gone home except for Jordana, who'd been there, yet hadn't really been present the entire time. Mary stood by his side, looking elegant and refined and deeply troubled, as she deferred to him to get to the bottom of all this crazy talk. Jordana had never shown up for lunch last Sunday, leaving them all frantic with worry. He'd nearly called the police, but had tried her phone one last time. She'd answered and had said she had been there, but that an emergency had come up, so she'd left. She refused to say what the emergency was, remaining suspiciously vague. She'd been acting strange ever since Eric had left her. Henry was furious with Eric for what he'd put his little girl through. He wasn't worthy of Jordan's love. Yet Henry could understand how he felt, in a way. After all, he himself had been blessed with 6 beautiful daughters. Yes, he would have liked to have had at least one son to carry on the winery, but he wasn't complaining. Children were gifts from God. If Mary hadn't been able to have children, it would have devastated him. But he wouldn't have had an affair and left her for another woman. He would have simply adopted a baby, with a fine pedigree, of course. He would have still had a family. Henry could understand why Jordana was so upset as well. What woman didn't want to be a wife and mother? He suddenly thought of his sister, Annabeth. He refused to call her Anna. She'd never had children. She'd never married, but she'd had plenty of suitors. He now wondered if maybe she couldn't. His Jordana was so much like his sister. It would make sense if they were both infertile. Maybe that was why his sister had gone crazy in the end. And now he was terrified Jordana was headed for the same fate. I'm changing my name to Anna Wilks, selling my house and moving to a place called Mystic Valley, Vermont. Jordana repeated, trying to sound firm, but he heard the quake in her voice. There was still hope he could change her mind, and he'd be damned if he would call her Anna either. But why, sweetheart? Mary finally asked quietly, looking hurt. She smoothed her chicly styled golden blonde hair and adjusted her lavender silk pantsuit. What's wrong with your name? Anger and disappointment surged through Henry. Not for the first time he regretted letting Jordana spend so much time with her aunt before she died. Nothing is wrong with my name. It's just not who I am anymore. Neither is Mrs. Jordan Mills. Anna Wilks makes me feel inspired, and that's something I need right now. Why not move back here with us? We'll set you on the right track. We know plenty of eligible men, many of whom already have children. You could start over, Mary said, softly adding, you could still be a mother. I've accepted my fate, Mother, Jordana said with resolve. I need this. I need to get away. It's time I find out who I really am. What makes me happy? You're our daughter. You've always known what you wanted. You were meant to be a wife and mother. You just need time. Maybe you should talk to someone. I know a guy, Henry said sternly, feeling every one of his 69 years. She was 34. His opinion didn't carry as much weight as it once did, and for the first time ever, he felt helpless. He didn't like not being in control. No, Father, you always knew what you wanted me to be. Frankly, I don't have a clue. That much was apparent, he thought. She looked too thin and run down, her hair a little frizzy and her clothes wrinkled, not at all put together like she used to be, and nothing like her immaculate sisters. Lord only knew what would happen if she went to a place like that by herself. But how will you live? Her mother asked, looking worried. Jordana's face hardened stubbornly. I have plenty of money, thanks to Eric's guilt. Henry felt like he was losing her. Vermont, he spat. Why Vermont? I've never even heard of Mystic Valley. It sounds so unrefined. Jordana finished his thought, and then added her own. I think it sounds charming. Refined obviously hasn't worked for me. Maybe it's time I tried something else. Like your Aunt Annabeth? He grasped at any straw he could. Look how she turned out. Why, you're choosing to throw your life away. Because that's exactly what will happen if you follow in her footsteps. He shook his head and felt his perfectly styled hair slip out of its gelled place. I am following in her footsteps, Jordana said almost reverently. I'm choosing to live. How? He asked, desperately adding in a loud voice a bit more harsh than he intended. What in the hell are you going to do in a place like Mystic Valley, Vermont? His baby looked him square in the eye, and for a moment he could swear he was staring at his sister come back from the dead. As she said with raised chin before walking out the door and not looking back, whatever I damn well please. Mystic Valley was a small, old-fashioned Vermont town, with rustic farmhouses and covered bridges, worlds apart from a modern city like Syracuse, with its busy streets and high-rise buildings. Located in Maple County in the middle of the Vermont Piedmont, the town was nestled at the foothills of the Green Mountains, between several rolling hills and lakes formed by glaciers. The surrounding forests gave off the feeling of being in the...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?